Let me ask you something uncomfortable. What do you do when everything in your life is finally fine, but you don't feel fine at all? Not broken, not sad, not in crisis, just empty. Here's the strange part. You did what you were supposed to do. You worked hard, you stayed responsible, you built a life that looks solid from the outside. Bills get paid, people respect you, there's food in the fridge, there's a routine, there's stability. So why does it feel like something quietly shut off inside? There's no big pain, no dramatic sadness, just a low-volume question that refuses to go away. Is this it? You don't say that out loud because it sounds wrong, ungrateful, maybe even selfish. After all, who complains when life is working? So you keep moving, you stay busy, you don't poke at the feeling too much. But late at night or early in the morning when everything slows down, it's there. That flatness, that strange calm that doesn't feel peaceful. The sense that life is happening, but you're not fully inside it anymore. And this is the part that really messes with people. Nothing is wrong enough to justify feeling this way. If something were broken, you could fix it. If something hurt, you could point to it. If you were failing, at least the story would make sense. But this feeling doesn't come from failure. It shows up after success, after stability, after the scramble ends. Nobody warns you about this stage of life. They warn you about burnout, about stress, about depression, but they don't tell you what happens when the hustle stops, the noise fades, and you're left alone with yourself. That's when the real questions start. Not loud questions, quiet ones. The kind that don't panic you, they just sit there, waiting. If you've ever thought, I should be happier than this, or I don't know what I'm chasing anymore, or why does everything feel so muted now? Then this video isn't here to entertain you. It's here for recognition. We're not going to hype you up. We're not going to fix you. We're not going to hand you 5 steps to feel alive again. Because this feeling isn't a mistake. It's a signal. And once you understand what it's actually pointing to, this quiet emptiness starts to make sense. Stay with me. Most people numb this feeling and move on. Very few actually listen to it, and the ones who do never see their life the same way again. At first, you don't even know what to call this feeling, because there's nothing obvious to blame. Life isn't falling apart. In fact, compared to most people, things are going pretty well. There's no big drama, no emergency, no crisis pulling you apart, and that almost makes it harder. Because when nothing is wrong, you're not supposed to feel off. You look around and think, I have no real reason to complain. And that thought shuts you up. You tell yourself to be grateful, to stop overthinking, to push the feeling aside. But the emptiness doesn't come from wanting more things. It comes from not knowing what you're supposed to want anymore. You're not chasing survival now. You're not scrambling to prove yourself. You're not trying to escape chaos. Life is managed, organized, predictable. And that's when the question creeps in quietly. If this is what stability feels like, why does it feel so hollow? You don't talk about this with friends, because everyone else is busy complaining about stress, money, work, or problems you no longer have. Saying, I feel empty sounds ridiculous in comparison. So you keep it to yourself. You show up, you do what needs to be done, you play your role well. But inside, there's a strange disconnect, like you're watching your own life from a slight distance, present, but not fully engaged. This isn't sadness, it's not anger, it's not disappointment either. It's closer to emotional silence, a quiet absence where something used to be. And the most confusing part? You can't even remember when that something slowly faded away. For most of your life, there was always something to push against, a deadline, a goal, a problem that needed fixing. You stayed in motion because standing still wasn't an option. There was always pressure to earn more, to do better, to hold things together, and even when it was exhausting, it gave your days a kind of shape, a reason to wake up and move. But then, slowly, something changed. The big fires got put out, the chaos settled, the bills stopped feeling scary, the future stopped feeling fragile. Life didn't get perfect, but it got stable. And when that happened, the noise dropped. At first, the quiet felt like relief. No more constant urgency, no more running on adrenaline, no more feeling like everything could fall apart at any moment. But relief doesn't last forever. Because once the pressure is gone, the momentum goes with it. The thing that kept you moving all those years suddenly isn't there anymore. And that's when the silence starts to feel heavy. You wake up without the same edge. You go through your day without that inner push. You get things done, but something feels flat, like the volume has been turned down. This is the part nobody prepares you for. You're not tired because life is hard. You're tired because life is quiet. The chase that once gave you direction is ended, but nothing meaningful has taken its place yet. So your days feel lighter and strangely emptier at the same time. And deep down, you know this isn't laziness. It's not age. It's not burnout. It's what happens when the hustle finally lets go of you. On the surface, everything works. The schedule makes sense. The responsibilities are manageable. The systems you built actually hold. Life runs smoothly now. And that's the problem. Your days are full, but they blur together. Morning turns into evening without leaving much behind. You do what needs to be done, but it rarely feels like it means anything anymore. There's no chaos to fight, no urgency to survive, no mountain that demands your full attention. So life becomes efficient, predictable, controlled. And slowly, without you noticing, meaning slips out of the picture. You're busy, but not engaged, active, but not present. Everything functions, but nothing really moves you. This is the strange trade no one talks about. Stability gives you safety, but safety alone doesn't give you depth. You can build a life that runs perfectly and still feel disconnected from it. That's when you start to feel like an observer in your own routine, like you're playing a role you once chose but no longer fully recognize. Nothing is wrong, nothing is missing on the surface, yet something essential isn't being touched anymore. And because you can't point to what's missing, the emptiness feels vague, hard to name, easy to ignore. But it doesn't go away. It waits. At some point, you stop feeling things the way you used to. Not in a dramatic way. There's no breakdown, no collapse, just a gradual dulling. The highs don't really lift you anymore. The lows don't hit as hard either. Everything stays somewhere in the middle. You laugh when you're supposed to, you react when it's expected, but the reactions feel learned, not lived. It's not that you're unhappy, it's that you're unmoved. Moments that should land don't. Achievements feel lighter than they should. Problems feel distant, like they belong to someone else. You start noticing that nothing really lingers. Joy fades quickly. Discomfort passes without teaching you anything. Life keeps happening, but it doesn't leave a mark. This isn't emotional control, it's emotional flattening. And it's confusing because from the outside you seem calmer than ever. You're not reactive, you're not dramatic, you're steady. People might even admire that, but inside, it feels like the volume knob has been turned down too far. You're still hearing life, just not feeling it. And the longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to remember what fully alive used to feel like. You don't miss a specific emotion, you miss intensity itself. Not chaos, not suffering, just depth. And that absence is subtle enough to ignore, but heavy enough to stay. For years, you were given a simple promise. Work hard, make the right choices, build a stable life, and happiness will follow. It sounded reasonable, logical, almost guaranteed. So you followed the script. You sacrificed, you delayed things, you stayed disciplined while others drifted. You told yourself it would be worth it later. And in many ways, it was. You got the job, the security, the respect, the sense that you made it through something difficult. But the happiness part didn't arrive the way you expected. Not as a wave, not as relief, not as something that settled in and stayed. Instead, it showed up in small moments and then quietly left again. That's when the doubt begins. Not loud doubt, not panic, just a quiet confusion. You start wondering if you misunderstood the deal, if happiness was never meant to be permanent, or if something about you is broken for not feeling more satisfied. But the truth is simpler than that. The promise wasn't a lie, it was incomplete. Stability can remove fear, it can reduce stress, it can give you space to breathe, but it can't tell you why you're here now that the struggle is over. No one talks about that part. No one tells you what comes after making it. So when the excitement fades and the silence remains, it feels personal, like you failed at the final step. But you didn't. You just reached the end of a story that was never meant to answer everything. This is where most people make a mistake. They treat this emptiness like a problem, something to fix, something to escape from as quickly as possible. So they add more noise, another goal, another distraction, another reason to stay busy. But this feeling doesn't respond to more activity. Because it's not showing up to hurt you, it's showing up to get your attention. This emptiness isn't random. It doesn't arrive during chaos. It shows up when life finally gives you room to breathe. When the old pressures fall away. When the roles loosen. When the constant pushing stops. That's when it speaks. Not loudly, not urgently, just enough to be noticed. And what it's saying isn't something is wrong with you. It's saying something that used to drive you no longer does. This is a signal, not a flaw. A sign that the motivations that carried you this far have expired, that the rewards you were chasing have already given you everything they could. You're not broken, you're between chapters. And that space in between always feels empty, because the old story has ended, and the new one hasn't taken shape yet. Most people panic here. They rush to fill the gap. They grab onto anything familiar just to feel grounded again. But if you slow down instead, you start to see this emptiness differently. Not as a void, but as space. And space, uncomfortable as it is where something honest finally has room to emerge. For a long time, you knew exactly who you were, or at least you knew who you needed to be. The responsible one, the provider, the problem solver, the person who keeps things from falling apart. That version of you worked. It got results. It earned respect. It carried you through years that demanded strength and consistency. But slowly, that identity starts to feel tight, like clothes that once fit perfectly and now don't. Not because you failed at it, because you outgrew it. The problem is you don't know what replaces it yet. So you're stuck in an in-between state. The old role doesn't fully make sense anymore, but there's no clear new one to step into. And that's deeply unsettling. Because identity gives structure. It tells you how to act, what to value, where to aim. When it loosens, everything feels slightly unsteady. You still do the same things. You still show up the same way. But something inside knows you're running on an outdated version of yourself. That's why the emptiness feels personal here. It's not about life. It's about you. The person you built your world around no longer feels like the center of it. And without a replacement, you feel unanchored. Most people don't name this. They just feel restless, irritable, disconnected. But underneath all of that is a quiet truth. You're no longer who you were, and you're not yet who you're becoming. And that space between identities always feels like losing ground, even when it's actually preparation. When this emptiness starts to surface, most people don't face it directly. They stay busy instead. Not because they're overwhelmed, but because stillness feels dangerous now. So the days get filled Work stretches a little longer, screens stay on a little later. There's always something playing in the background. News, podcasts, social media, anything to keep the silence from getting too loud. It looks productive, it looks normal, even healthy. But it's avoidance. Because the moment things slow down, the feeling comes back. That quiet weight, that sense of being slightly disconnected from your own life. So you keep moving. You run errands you don't need to run, you scroll without interest, you plan things you're not excited about. Not because they matter, but because they keep you occupied. This isn't distraction from stress, it's distraction from yourself. Silence used to be rest. Now it feels uncomfortable, almost threatening. Because in silence, there's no role to perform, no task to complete, no version of you to maintain. Just you. And without the noise, the questions start forming again. Not urgent, not dramatic, just honest. That's why the phone comes out. That's why the TV stays on. That's why busyness becomes a habit instead of a need. Not to escape life, to avoid hearing what life is quietly asking next. What you're really avoiding isn't emptiness. It's what shows up when you finally stop running. Because when everything goes quiet, there's no script left to follow, no role to step into, no expectations to meet. You're not a provider in that moment, not a fixer, not the dependable one. You're just here. And that's uncomfortable in a way most people aren't prepared for. Without roles, you don't know how to measure yourself. There's nothing to achieve, nothing to prove, nothing to improve. No scoreboard telling you how you're doing. So the mind gets restless. It asks questions you can't answer with logic or effort, questions that don't respond to planning or discipline. Who am I when I'm not useful? What's left when I stop being needed? What actually matters now? These aren't dramatic thoughts. They don't arrive with fear or panic. They arrive quietly, almost politely. That's what makes them unsettling, because you can't argue with them. You can't outwork them. You can't solve them by staying busy. They wait. And sitting with yourself long enough to hear those questions feels risky, like something solid might dissolve if you look too closely. So most people don't. They keep the noise on, they keep the pace up, they keep themselves occupied. Not because they're afraid of falling apart, but because they're afraid of meeting themselves without the armor they've worn for decades. And that fear, more than anything else, keeps the emptiness alive. This phase isn't a detour. It isn't a mistake. And it isn't something you're meant to rush through. It shows up for a reason. You don't reach this kind of quiet by failing. You reach it by surviving long enough, building enough, and stabilizing enough for the noise to finally stop. That's why it feels so unfamiliar. For most of your life, forward meant effort. Progress meant pressure. Movement meant struggle. This phase doesn't work that way. Nothing is pushing you anymore. And that can feel like being lost, even when you're not. This is the space after achievement, not before it. The place where external goals stop working and internal ones haven't formed yet. It feels empty because it isn't crowded with demands. It feels still because nothing is chasing you. But stillness isn't stagnation. This is where direction quietly resets, where the old incentives lose power, where motivation shifts from proving something to understanding something. Most people misread this moment. They think they've lost drive, lost ambition, lost their edge. They haven't. They've just outgrown the kind of motivation that only responds to pressure. This phase matters because it forces a different kind of listening, one that doesn't reward speed or effort, only honesty. And if you don't try to escape it, something subtle begins to happen. The emptiness stops feeling like a void and starts feeling like room. At this point, most people ask the wrong question. They ask how to feel motivated again, how to feel happy again, how to get their old drive back. But that drive belonged to a different phase of life. The question that actually matters now is quieter and harder to face. What matters to you when no one is watching? When there's nothing to prove? When success no longer defines the direction? This phase doesn't respond to goals, it responds to truth. Not the kind of truth you announce, the kind you admit only to yourself. The emptiness you've been feeling isn't asking to be filled, it's asking to be listened to. It's pointing away from performance and toward meaning. That meaning won't arrive as a big revelation. It won't come with excitement or certainty. It starts as a subtle pull, a quiet sense of alignment, a feeling of rightness that doesn't need applause. You don't chase it, you don't force it, you notice it. And slowly the question changes. Not what should I do next, but what feels honest now. That question doesn't rush you, it doesn't pressure you, it doesn't promise anything dramatic. But if you stay with it long enough, it reshapes everything. Because the life that comes after emptiness isn't louder, it's truer. And once you feel that difference, you stop trying to go back to who you were. You move forward differently.